Today, Mike and I are going to be talking about leveraging AI in growing your financial advisory firm. Mike's company, Impruve, does a lot of work in this space. For a little bit of context for us at the Podcast Consultant, we work with about 80, 90 podcasts, and the majority of those are in finance. A lot of financial advisors, fund managers, investors. So there's a lot of crossover in our audiences. So we figured this would be a fun topic because it comes up more and more in my questions that I get from clients and prospects as we talk about what their firm looks like now, what marketing looks like now, where it's going. People asking questions about AI and how it's going to affect maybe their podcast and marketing efforts. And that's something Mike deals with a lot. So I figured this would be a fun conversation to put together. Yeah, we'll put this up at the end. I think this is just kind of our little final outro slide. So let's dive right in. Mike, first of all, I will give the quick intros how we know each other.
Right.
I've got your book up here. So
Fantastic.
if anyone wants a side quest for yourself, and you want to know more about Mike, you can pick up his book he just recently wrote called Sweaty Equity. And give us the high level. What's the book about real quick? And then we'll jump into the real topic.
Yeah, sure. So the book is sort of microscopic, introspective lens on the survival years of my first startup. And Carl and I know each other because Carl was the first engineer and de facto CTO of those survival years of the company called Packback. And what it evolved to was an early pioneer of an AI use case in higher education, instructional AI enhanced writing practice. But none of that really is in the book. The book tells the story of the co-founders and Carl and the early kind of rowdy gang going through startup survival mode. So when we started, we were trying to disrupt expensive textbooks. And at the same time, I was working a side job as a what's called a ball boy for the Chicago Bulls. So the story is sort of about those overlap roads where I would by day be pitching angel investors and doing all the startup things as a 21, 22-year-old. And by night, I was doing laundry in NBA locker rooms and mopping the floor during games. And what happened was those two worlds collided in a very dramatic fashion because on a Friday night, my co-founder Casey and I aired on Shark Tank. We were very young, 23 years old. We did a deal with Mark Cuban. We had very little revenue, but he took a liking to us. That was on a Friday night. 8 million people saw that. And the very next day, I was back in the laundry room of the Chicago Bulls, pulling towels out of the dryer. And an email went through the whole organization. Hey, a ball boy was on Shark Tank. And we made a temporary trip to what felt to me like the top of the world, and then everything crashed down, and we had to then survive and get through that. And so the story of Sweaty Equity is the crossroads of that. It's a little behind the scenes NBA. It's a little what's happening in the midnight journals of a startup founder. It's all 10 years in the past, but I felt like it was time to get the story out.
It was very fun I haven't read the whole thing, but I started skimming over and reading the first chapters, and very fun to relive some of that. I was much more on the internal side, dealing with the engineering and product stuff. So I didn't get as much exposure to the side that Mike had. So it was really fun to read your perspective there. But okay, so let's talk about AI. Let's just jump completely and totally shift gears here. You obviously started to explore what AI tools and generative AI and the sort of the current LLMs are doing as you were building the Packback towards the last few years there. And then, when you left, I assume you thought there's more potential here. There's something else I want to do here. What kind of introduced you or got you into this problem space after that?
Yeah, it was very organic how my co-founder, who's also my brother, Danny, and I, Danny's the software engineer here behind the founding team of Impruve. It was pretty organic how we landed on sort of our ICP, ideal customer profile, or as we think of it, the hero of financial advisors. So the story of how we discovered that this was where we wanted to be, Packback sold to a private equity group. As that sale process began, I actually promoted a CEO internally so that I could step out. I was, as an entrepreneur, as I'm sure you are too, Carl, kind of champing at the bit do more on top of what was the early stage of large language models. It came into the first company at the tail end of us kind of reaching scale. I mean, we were 20 million revenue company, 2 million students and professors had used it. So then we were sort of not AI native, but not Gen AI native, but injecting it in. We were a previous version of AI native. So then the thought of building an AI native company. And there were a range of interests that we had. We started noodling around on middle manager coaching habits and this kind of sidekick concept around internal communications. And, what you do as an entrepreneur is you just kind of tinker and you build and you talk to a lot of people. And before long, we had this AI operating system that we were just using for ourselves and other early stage entrepreneurs were using. And so, there's a million AI note takers out there, right? But the idea is, what can you use those notes and voice memos and messages that you might tag? Like, what do you use all that stuff for? And so we had a prototype of what we do today for financial advisors that was being refined and tinkered from a user experience standpoint with early stage entrepreneurs. And it was actually through becoming a client of one of my previous company angel investors that I kind of went through the onboarding experience with a financial advisor. Now, I was a finance major in college. I was obsessed with Warren Buffett. My brother Danny had worked at JP Morgan Chase. So we knew the industry a little bit, but it was going through that process and actually seeing how much labor was being done on their end of the table. I was fine as the client, but on their end, I was like, wow, yeah, there's a lot of people involved here. And so that's where Danny and I had been thinking, okay, at some point we want to really go deep on one niche user type, but one hero's journey, because you start to understand all the nuances of that one person versus serving a variety of different types. So it was kind of organically. I called up that advisor after our meeting and said, hey, tell me all about what's happening on your end of the table. And before long, we had 30 conversations, and a couple months into that, we said, hey, this is where we're going. And so, the response has been incredible thus far. And we've kind of found our niche by being somewhere in the middle of like the pure SaaS plays out there, where it's, hey, just an out of the box tool, one size fits all. And then we're seeing, RIAs are launching and or PE-backed aggregators or hiring internal engineering teams is very costly. So we come in sort of in the middle, where we say we're a hybrid. We've got an out-of-the-box solution, but then we're remaining independent. We have the bandwidth to, we can't take on 1,000 clients, but we can look pretty deeply with our partners to be sort of a fractional AI team. And I think that's where we have the most fun, honestly.
That's really cool. So what are some areas you're seeing generative AI play a really big impact in the financial advising space with RIAs? Like, what are the things they're asking about most, or maybe you're seeing where there's the most value to drive early on?
Yeah, there's so many things. AI is this horizontal enabling layer, as like Jeff Bezos would say. And so we're being brought in many cases, we'll do kind of a deep discovery process, try to understand what's the full tech stack right now and what can be stitched together and ultimately consolidated. But without even going into the tech, like I think us as tech people, we sort of confuse the narrative sometimes by talking about features in the tech. I think of AI as like it's the next employee, right?
Yeah.
And so if we think about what are the jobs to be done, that's where I think we end up landing on the most value-added features is just, okay, what's going on here? And so we think of the game of financial advisory, right? And I hate to call it a game, but just to think in that framework, as this whole thing kind of comes down to trust, right? So there's two big schools of thought forming around, are there entirely like AI advisors? It's the age-old robo-advisor, but it is a different conversation today than 10 years ago, robo-advisor, because you can have an in-depth conversation, and if you can do it in a secure environment, the capabilities of AI gets pretty close to the logic and the questioning and the planning that an advisor goes through. So there's a lot of money being thrown into, VC money. Hey, we're going to displace all the advisors.
Fully automated AI-powered advisor.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Now we're on the other side. We think, hey, actually, the game here, similar to what we did with college professors in higher education, is you scale that advisor. But the crux of that argument of the advisor staying, at the centerpiece of we think today's household is this thing of trust. So
Yeah, totally.
if it weren't for and this is like ubiquitous across when we talk to clients of advisors, talk to the advisors themselves, tech people, non-tech people, it all comes down to like, yeah, I want a person that I trust to be at the center of all these accounts and financial decisions, even though I understand the logic of it can be performed by AI. Yeah. So in building an RIA or building a book of business, what's interesting from our vantage point is that no individual advisor has a monopoly on the trust earning moments. So we think of like trust earning as like this chain, right? Where there's all these trust earning moments that occur, whether it's something breaking in the news, a certain life event, somebody's rattled for some reason again, it could be in the news or something personally happening. And so the problem I think a lot of these advisors are facing is they're having to cast a very wide net on their relationships, even outside of current clients, and everybody else can cast a similar net. And so the advisor who's AI augmented versus not has all this advantage of, you can cast a net to 300, 400, 500 relationships and be there at the right time with the right message for those trust earning moments when somebody else doesn't. And so we think of like, how do you earn that trust? Well, the client has to believe that you have time for them. Okay, well, how do you serve that? Well, we have a agentic back office. Take the notes, draft the follow-up email, update the CRM, update the calendar. That's all the bucket of agentic back office. The client has to feel that you as the advisor have their family on your mind at the right moments. Okay, well, how do you do that? We have this whole relationship intelligence portal. And this is where a lot of customization particularly happens as we become like a fractional AI team. People just do things differently. So we think of catalogs on relationships. So you have a rapport catalog. What was the dog's name that was mentioned 18 months ago? You have questions asked catalog. So, hey, so-and-so's husband asked this question 12 months ago, and it's now related to something happening in the news. Like you want to archive that. And then you have things like key dates catalog. So then all that mixes together with our third pillar where we think about the client has to feel that you as the advisor have expertise and the interest to educate them on that expertise. So that's our continue EDU kind of content studio where, there's a lot you can do in aggregating news and articles. We do that, but we're not as interested in it. What's more interesting is if you're going to share something, whether it's something you wrote yourself, which we can have AI help, not from a AI generated text standpoint. I mean, we can do that, but from telling me, hey, here's the concepts you talked about and taught people over the last 2-3 weeks. Okay, pull those ones out. So it's less like purely AI generated text. But if you can then marry some of these unique relationship intelligence catalogs with why you are sending content or reaching out to somebody, that to me is the magic of now casting a net of 300, 400 relationships. Yeah. So long-winded answer, but those are the types of things we
No, I love it. And I think philosophically, this matches with where I found AI at its current state to be really helpful is kind of being a second brain for me. And that's kind of what you're, and rather than think of it as a fully functional autonomous employee, I think of it as another repository of knowledge that I can tap and like it can organize and make connections that I maybe wouldn't by default. And it can do it at a larger scale than I can. But it needs a human in the loop. And to your point, because of the human trust element that is really important. People still buy from people. And then the other part is honestly like fact checking and gut checking, which I think still matters in a lot of fields. Now, financial advising, especially once you get into more nuanced things, I just like, if I think about if I'm going to give a financial advisor $10 million of my money, I kind of want to know that they actually are thinking about the things and not just tossing it all over the fence to the AI, right? And I think most people are like that. It's not I think we've all seen, if you play with ChatGPT enough, you've seen it hallucinate and tell you things that are just blatantly false very confidently. And it kind of makes me a little bit worried about giving it all my money, Now, again, I want it to help my advisor. I want it to make my advisor smarter, more powerful, able to make connections and personal advice better. Awesome. Right. But I don't want to like sort of just pass the buck completely. And I think that's where real humans are at right now, which is why this is such a cool opportunity for advisors to kind of integrate the technology rather than think of it as a competitor to them. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We do some things where we'll help. There's all kinds of like helping draft an email, right? So our out of the box system on this concept of relationships intelligence will reach out to me and tell me, hey, it's time to check in with Carl Hughes. It's been 90 days. This is a quarterly type catch up. Here's your relationship type. And it'll draft, here's what you talked about last time. Here's what's been going on with Carl. It'll give me kind of a pick list of what I want to include or not. We advise everybody, put human eyes on any message, let alone a financial plan or decision, put human eyes on it still. But if you can get to like those first drafts where now, rather than me perhaps opening up my inbox and, feeling that like mental knot of who's overdue to catch up, where things falling through the cracks. Now it can lay up for me like, hey, this thing's falling through the cracks. Here's who you need to talk to. I've drafted it all. And now I can go through a quick queue and look at what's drafted and tweak. But to blindly let, AI communicate, we were seeing a lot of that in higher education, the problems there too. So no, I wouldn't advise that at all.
Yeah. So the another thing that comes up a lot, because I think, again, you kind of mentioned we're both a little bit forward on our tech usage. Like we're kind of out there exploring the new stuff a lot and we're seeing the pros and cons, but something that comes up from our clients a lot. It's like, well, how much of this is really just hype and noise versus something I should actually pay attention to? And what I'm curious to hear is, do you hear things like client expectations sort of rising because of the personalization that AI can help you achieve? Do you hear things like advisors just drowning in work because they're not using these tools? Like, where's the pain point that this really solves for?
That's an interesting question. On the client side, I don't know that there's like this overwhelming demand right now, because the ideal is that they don't really notice like it's happening behind the scenes. I think there's a future state. Like personally, I would like to be able to chat with an AI that is connected to my advisor's operating system, basically. So, there are, I think, situations where one, I like the immediacy of getting an answer back from ChatGPT, but I also do like, different modeling type scenarios that I'm just kind of noodling on some concepts. So, hey, what if, we did this purchase and then this saving, and I'm just kind of brainstorming.
Right.
It's one of the things that like a ChatGPT is just so nice to be able to brainstorm with, but you don't want to do that in an open LLM. Right, like with financial information. You also
here's all my bank accounts. Now answer me some questions about it. Like, I don't know if I want to give ChatGPT all that.
Right. So you don't always want to do that. You also don't necessarily always need or want to like call up or schedule a call with your advisor, right? And if we're saying more and more advisors are scaling their book, right? So they're trying to figure out how to get to north of 100 clients, right? Which, historically you'd see a lot of like, we cap at 40 to 50 if they're part of a large wirehouse, and minimum asset level is 10 million. Well, a lot of that's kind of going out the door. So I think there's a future where I have an AI chat portal that then is sort of continuing to build the catalog of things that my advisor knows about me, which I want them to know about me. The worst part about financial planning meeting with an advisor is if you have to spend 15, 20 minutes,
just catching them back up.
Here's what's been going on. Oh, that decision about the house, we end up, it's like, I want that all to be ready. So if the AI chat could then be like flagging up to the advisor, this is something we think about future state, to where maybe the advisor then gets a signal that, hey, it's time to reach out to Carl. He's noodling on these concepts. Like he probably needs a little human interaction here before the meeting that's coming up in 2 months. So that's a really cool thing. But then it also further just builds like the knowledge base or the catalogs for that advisor in managing Carl Hughes as a client. So that I think is where the client starts to, feel AI more. I think right now we're still, behind the scenes. Let's clean up the back office for the advisor. Let's figure out how to scale a growing RIA without the costs having to incrementally grow as well. And then again, this game of like casting a wide net and being early in the the trust earning moments. That to me is the thing that has sense of urgency. The shininess of like AI note taking, we kind of laugh about that internally. We compare it to like when the electrical appliance era was taking form, the light bulb was the killer app. Jeff Bezos has this. The light bulb was the killer app. People were thinking about turning the lights on in a room. They weren't yet thinking about embedding a home with electricity. So to me, that's the opportunity of where we are. The AI advancement curve is going to continue to accelerate. I look at our job as a quasi sort of consultant, right? We have an out-of-the-box tool, and we're also fractional in-houses, help put AI at the right place, right time, with the right context as AI superpowers evolve. So note-taking is this thing that gives us an asset of compounding context. But to try to go and like build a business as a note-taker, to me, it's like building a light bulb business. It's a commodity already.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. You kind of touched on this a couple times, and I want to like drill in a bit because it is a big concern. We deal with, our clients and your clients deal with a lot of sensitive financial information. So we're all concerned with both data security, privacy, where data is getting stored, where data is getting transferred, and all that. And I think this is one of the big concerns with LLMs is that most of them are built off of these models that kind of continue to evolve based on the things you give it, right? So if today you're on a free ChatGPT plan and you go ask it financial questions, it takes that input and is going to help build the future versions of the model, which is fine for them. That's their right. But like, you don't want to put your client's sensitive information in there, obviously. So what do advisors need to think about when it comes to security, and how do you build an environment that is contained so that they can get that while still having all the context and information an LLM needs?
Yeah. This is such an interesting one. We pretty much every week hear another example of something within a firm, right? That's like slipping into ChatGPT. And so I don't know that anybody's out there like, so bold that they're dropping, the client details into ChatGPT, but where things slip.
But I mean, all it takes is accidentally uploading a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? Like, that would be scary.
Things like this. It's the accidental, hey, there's an email thread going on. It doesn't feel sensitive. Drop that, copy paste that thread into ChatGPT. Can you give me my reply here? And oops, there happened to be something in there. So one of the first things we do is make sure, hey, like firm wide, let's create a secure environment where, that ability to access AI to make use of the data inputs that you have, the email thread, the meeting transcript, whatever it is, can be all secure. So like, there's a whole long compliance checklist and, security checklist that our CTO would cover individually firms, but it comes down to like, is the data encrypted in transit? Is it encrypted on rest? And then what are the data privacy policies and training policies of the vendor, which is us, right, or the consultant? And so we don't train on any data, we don't monetize or have any plans to monetize. And these are the things that you just have to like cross. You have to get over that barrier before I think you can even play with AI. And especially for some of these larger aggregators where they have more advisors than what, the president and the leadership team, can maybe be aligning all systems on. I mean, over time they do, but that's where you have this sort of, I'd call it like data leakage into ChatGPT because somebody needed a quick fix on like, drafting an email. So, that's where we see the vulnerability.
Yeah.
It's not on purpose, but it does happen on accident.
Yeah. And part of it, like any security thing, is an education piece. I think this is something I always thought about a lot as a CTO when I was at startups, was just like making sure that people on our team know what phishing emails look like, right? It sounds so simple, but the easiest way to crack into somebody's company is essentially those kind of social engineering mistakes rather than technical mistakes. And so it's something, as advisors, especially small RIAs and, with just a small team, like you got to be really careful of, because you probably don't have an in-house, security advisor and who's going to, educate everybody on onboarding. It's definitely something to think about. But yeah, I wanted to ask as well about sort of calibrating the models. So what I mean is, every financial advisor is different. And this is one of the fun things about working in this space. I think from the outside, you're like, oh, well, financial advisor is kind of a commodity, right? Like you work with high net worth people to make sure their money is all in the right places. Like, shouldn't that just be a robot? And again, when you dive into the nuance, you're like, no, they all have their different niche that they're good at. They all have their specialties and their style and their preferences. And there's a wide range. There's people who are all into all sorts of aggressive alt investments, and there's people who are super conservative, and there's a whole range in the middle, and none of those are right or wrong, and it's all personal what you're going for. So how do you guys calibrate, improve, or how can advisors think about calibrating an AI to like match what their style is? Like, what's the fastest, easiest way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is why we're not out there like chasing scale right now. We're in this mode of how do we go, as deep as possible with, a more narrow client list and stay, financially independent. And we do have, folks in the space that have raised 10, 20 million in venture capital to go paint the town red and be the leading note taker. Okay. We think, again, note taking is a commodity. The reason, we're a little bit more of a boutique is on this question that you asked. I think the way you framed it was how do we calibrate? Everybody is quite different, and so we see a lot of customization requests. And now some of those, are something that you just add as a widget to the out of the box solution of here's your custom templates or things that you want parsed out. But there's some art and nuance to getting what you want the AI to get out of, your collection of meetings, your context window. So one of the things that we just built was to be able to have an AI chat. We had been doing it before where you can chat with the individual meeting, but to universally chat with all of your conversations. This is a really wide context window. Doing the tinkering of like, what are you parsing out of things like that, gets to be pretty unique. And based on the firm and their client type, they tend to want different things. So, if they're talking about ultra high net worth clientele, and this is going to be multi-generational, there's likely some, customized visualization, data storage, relationship between different databases of how we're mapping out like, hey, here's the cross-generational family management. We do a lot in like COI mapping. So I don't know, there could be a firm where their network or their client list comes primarily from like a church network, right? Okay, well, maybe here's an individual that's low on asset level in your book of business, but like this is the person, at this church or in this community center, that is opening all these different doors. And so, what we like to do is say, hey, let's start at North Star goals. What are we trying to achieve? What's breaking? What are the friction points in the workflow? And let's go from there. So there's parse outs on like note taking, things like that. There's also in email, there's a lot of different things to be done. So like if you're building an AI tool that has access to email, those pretty cool APIs to be able to play around with. So there's a lot of like signal that gets lost in the noise between email, CRM, task lists. And so we had examples recently. We wanted the AI to identify promises made. So an advisor in an email says, oh, I'll introduce you to Carl, right? Or I'll send you this thing, whatever it is. Be able to have the AI identify, okay, Mike made a promise on, July 29th. Itemize what that is, and then go through all the right channels and check, was promise executed? Day 1, no. Was promise executed? Day 2, no. Day 3, okay, have the AI remind Mike, hey, this is now high priority of your next action. You owe this promise that you made to Carl of whatever it is. So, everybody tends to have a different CRM structure, uses email differently. This is where I think one out of the box tool is kind of hard to serve all those use cases.
Yeah.
But over time, like the 80-20 rule will form.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just as a side note, if you've got any questions, you want to put them in the chat, feel free. Otherwise, I've got a few more, so I'll keep going with Mike. But please, anyone in the audience, feel free to throw your own in there. Love to have some extras. So this kind of relates to what you were just saying there, Mike, which is evaluating tools and use cases. Like, how do you recommend a firm that is a standard, RAA, not really integrating AI in their day to day much, where do they start, right? Because it's kind of overwhelming. I mean, like, look, I love all the ideas you're throwing out there. Like, doing all this sounds great, right? But that sounds like it's going to take me months to build, and with you guys, even like whatever. What's the quick wins here? What are the little things they can start to do to kind of get comfortable with this and start to see what it might look like for them?
Yeah. I mean, the baseline quickest win is if they are considering AI note taking, do they have a secure environment in which to do it? Yeah. Or do they have one advisor using Fathom over here, another one using Fireflies over here, whatever? So you have to get to the baseline of secure environment. The next is, do you have data uniformity and connectedness? So we'll see like some of these like Plod devices are getting more popular. It's basically for like in person. I mean, you have the same functionality on your phone, but people are stamping these Plod devices either on their phone or on their body. And that then like sends notes to, somewhere else, right? Like over here in Plod. And then maybe you've got, like a Jumper Zox, which are popular like financial advisor AI note takers over here for in-person meetings. Then you're using Outlook or Gmail. So like you have all these things that are disconnected that back to this engine, as we think of it, of compounding context. The value of note taking, even though the functionality of it is a commodity, the value is, okay, pour all the things into this like same queue basically. And now you have compounding context on each individual relationship, and you figure out what you want to do with that. And so when you get to the question, like, well, somebody's like not AI native, they just want to make sure they're not way behind the curve, but they don't want to go so advanced. It's like, okay, let's just start having secure note taking. Then let's look at where there's data disjointedness, and let's pull all that together. And then back to like, think of it kind of like an employee. I'm not talking about like an autonomous employee, but what are your jobs that have to be done? What is Suzanne in client services doing that's just a real pain that we can remove from Suzanne's plate? And it's not even about like removing Suzanne's job. It's about taking the same core team that we have today and just being able to scale its impact without costs going up as the firm grows. So it doesn't have to be this big, stressful, daunting thing.
Right. I would say also look for opportunities to do things that your firm has traditionally not been able to do. So I had a good example come up from a client. They were mentioning this about like AI note takers on a call. And what they do is they kind of look over their notes every week or two, and they use that to come up with topics for their next blog posts and podcasts. So it's a really simple use case. I mean, again, you just need a off-the-shelf AI note taker that's secure, and you can get those reports kind of like sent to you every so often. Spend an hour thinking about like, what did you cover with clients over and over? What questions was coming up, and that gives you a really good sense of where your clients' fears are, their questions, their uncertainties. And especially with all of these things in the macroeconomic world changing, you kind of hear these same questions, and you can kind of compare how you responded several times and then use that to either write your own script for a podcast or at least use it as talking points for it or whatever you want to do there. I thought that was a really cool, just like tactical thing. And the nice thing is it helps you overcome that blank canvas problem of, well, I know we need to do marketing activity, but what am I going to talk about this week? Like, I don't have anything on the top of my mind. And I think that's a really useful tool. I could see that in every industry, but for financial advisors, certainly something
to build on that. So I mean, that's one of my favorite things. So we have this content studio in our out of the box solution has gotten. It'll do exactly that. Like I've got, my last 2 weeks of conversations, the AI is going through all those recent conversations and saying, hey, here's the topics that you've been talking about. But it's so interesting with AI generated content because it's just becoming this AI washed reality online and becoming easier, to detect who's just tossing out garbage AI written content. So I think there's a middle ground between like, oh, I need a content strategy, so I toss AI garbage into the ether. Or, hey, I'm like manually doing all of this stuff and staring at like a blank page, which as a writer, I like to do. I have writing sessions in the morning. You are a writer as well. But I think for like business, marketing, there's a place in the middle where it doesn't have to be garbage AI content. It can be the AI helping pull out quite literally your exact quotes about how you explain, backdoor IRAs, short-term rental properties. We're in the Chicago area, so we have an advisor who has clients that have Airbnbs in Michigan, right nearby. Okay, but Michigan gets very cold in the winter, so you're not going to have the same cash flow from those assets. And so this advisor was constantly coaching their clients on the strategy behind that. And so it's like, okay, you're already, to your point, explaining that the AI can parse your exact quotes, and it doesn't have to write the whole article. It could, and do it pretty closely with your exact quotes, or it can just give you the outline and you can finish it. Or maybe it's not a blog and it's a short video. Well, now, great. Now that's going to be very genuine content because you're actually recording it and it's your words, or you're doing a workshop or a podcast. So like there's this middle ground where the AI is just telling you and finding for you the nuggets you have already created.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the use cases for AI that's really strong right now, is that it's good at parsing a lot of textual data and then pulling out either key insights or repeated things or just patterns, And that's what their LLMs are all based on. They're just sucking lots of text data in and then making connections to make output. And so it really is its strong suit to me at this point. So leveraging that as your starting point is probably where you're going to get the best bang for your buck and time. But yeah, to your point, I do like the awareness here that it's not here to completely replace. It's here to kind of augment your brain and thinking and save you time. Not, it doesn't mean you should just hand it all over 100% yet. Maybe it gets there, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to be quite there. This has been really great. One thing I wanted to kind of touch on as we start to wrap up here, Mike, is the vision for the future for advisors, especially. I mean, I think there's a lot of things in this environment changing. There's been a lot of consolidation and roll-ups in the space. There's been, I talk to advisors regularly who are kind of worried about what AI is going to do to their industry or their viability as a business. What's your take on the long term? What's the 2 to 5 year, 10-year vision for where AI comes in and helps this industry or hurts it?
Well, if I take it down to the advisor's life, right? I mean, the hero's journey of the advisor, I think the two things are more flow state, right? And in more strength zone. So the vision is for the advisor to do what they do best, which is be client facing, be consultative, ask the right questions, pull from their trove of knowledge. And then boom, it all goes to the same unified AI operating system. And the grunt work that nobody likes doing, happens automatically and then shares out to, especially if you're building a team, shares out between the team, what context needs to be shared. So, we're like steps towards that, right? Because now, whatever, the notes are taken and the CRM's updated. But, I think there's many steps to go. And that, on the fear basis, it's like, okay, well, if the advisor is in flow state and strength zone for now 90 or 95% of their day, one, it's kind of like I have a coach, Matt McCall, says life flows through you when you get to those. Mm-hmm. So that's just happier for the advisor. And then just think about the traditional state of this industry, $10 million asset minimum, to be a client at wherever, Goldman Sachs. Right. And I know like that's certainly gone down. You have now this whole industry of fee only advisors. You can be a fee only advisor and serve 50 clients, 100 clients, maybe 300 clients. And so it's just like, I genuinely believe in the role of the advisor or the household CFO, as we like to think of it. And so the kind of irony of the space has been that the people who need it and households who need that coaching and consultation most aren't of the asset level where they're getting an advisor's time. And so now that advisor can work with, the entrepreneurs that are pre-liquid, but promising, the recent Booth or Kellogg or whatever MBA program grad, like all these different client types. And so to me, it's a viewpoint of abundance, not scarcity. And when you look at it that way, I don't think there's a lot of fear.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that take of it could, these tech tools could potentially expand this market in a way that it wouldn't have been viable a decade ago or 5 years ago to really go after that segment of the market because of the the fee model and all that makes sense. Super interesting, Mike. This has been fun. Anything else to add? I know Impruve.com is where you can find out about Impruve if you want to follow up with Mike or chat with him about how this could work in your firm. Thepodcastconsultant.com. If you're listening and don't have a podcast or thinking about it, we're always happy to chat. Anything else to add though, Mike?
No, I think my final remarks would be that, Carl and I could jump on this in 3 months and in 6 months, and the technicalities will no doubt have evolved. But I think the mindset here is, across the industry, having an AI strategy is sort of where we're at right now. It's just develop that strategy, and for us, as sort of the system architects call it, we're just trying to put whatever AI's next superpower. We're not inventing AI, right? Like anybody claiming that is like, there's only a handful of these real like model companies. But as we watch deep research or whatever the next AI feature is, continue to unfold, it's all right, put that superpower in the right place, right time, with the right context. And we don't start with the tech. You start with the human and the workflows and the advisors. So those are my final thoughts, Carl, but thank you for having me on.
Yes. Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll see you again soon. And thanks, Mike, for coming on.